Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, staring at the massive alien structure ahead. The space station Havenport was unlike anything humans had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, its dark metal surface covered with strange glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. "First time meeting aliens," said Lieutenant Ben Cooper, his voice shaky. "I still can't believe this is real." Jake nodded but kept his eyes on the screen. 3 months ago, humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel for the first time. 2 weeks later, they received a message from something called the Krillian Empire. The message was simple: come to Havenport for talks, or they would come to Earth instead. The choice was easy. "Docking bay is opening," reported Navigator Amy Walsh from her station. "They are guiding us in with some kind of tractor beam." Jake felt the ship shake slightly as invisible forces took control. The Defiance moved smoothly into a docking bay that could have held 10 ships their size. As soon as they stopped, the bay sealed behind them with a loud hiss. "Atmosphere is breathable," said Science Officer Carl Davis, checking his instruments. "Temperature is a bit cold, but we'll be fine." Admiral Lisa Crawford stepped onto the bridge, wearing her best-dressed uniform. She was a top military leader on Earth and had been chosen to speak for all of humanity. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. "Ready, Admiral?" Jake asked. "As ready as anyone can be for this," she replied. "Remember, we're here to learn. These Krillians have been flying between stars for over 1,000 years. We need to make a good first impression." The airlock opened with a soft whoosh. Jake, Admiral Crawford, and 4 other officers walked into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The ceiling was so high they could barely see it. Strange blue lights floated in the air without any visible support. Their boots echoed on the metal floor as they walked. After 10 minutes, they reached a massive door that split open silently. Beyond was a room the size of a football stadium. Hundreds of different aliens filled the space, all watching the humans with curious eyes. But the ones that caught Jake's attention were the Krillians. They were tall, at least 8 feet, with skin that looked like polished stone. Their eyes glowed red, and they wore armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal. When they moved, the armor moved with them like water. The largest Krillian stepped forward. His voice was deep and rumbled like thunder. "I am War Commander Zexthal of the Krillian Empire. You are the humans from the 3rd planet of the Sol system." Admiral Crawford stepped forward and saluted. "I am Admiral Lisa Crawford of Earth. We're honored to meet you." Zexthal looked at her for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been laughter. "Honored? Yes, we shall see about that." He gestured to a raised platform in the center of the room. "Your species claims to be warriors. Show us your weapons." Jake felt his stomach drop. This wasn't supposed to be about weapons. They had come here for peaceful talks. But Admiral Crawford nodded to the other officers. They had brought weapons, just in case. Lieutenant Cooper stepped forward with a standard assault rifle. He aimed at a target that appeared on the far wall and fired a burst. The bullets hit the target dead center. The sound of alien laughter filled the room. Not just from the Krillians, but from dozens of other species. Zexthal's red eyes seemed to glow brighter as he smiled, showing teeth like black diamonds. "Kinetic projectiles," he said, shaking his massive head. "How? Primitive." Another officer demonstrated their energy rifle. The bright blue beam struck the target and left a smoking hole. Again, more laughter. "Better," said Zexthal, "but still the tools of children." Finally, they brought out their newest weapon, a portable plasma cannon. It took 2 men to carry it. The plasma bolt that hit the target melted a section of the wall. This time, Zexthal didn't laugh. He just looked bored. "Observe," he said. A Krillian soldier stepped forward, carrying what looked like a simple rod of metal. He pointed it at a much larger target and pressed something. A beam of pure white light shot out. When it hit the target, the entire wall section vanished. Not melted, not destroyed. Gone, as if it had never existed. "This is a basic infantry weapon," Zexthal explained. "Our children train with these." Admiral Crawford's face had gone pale, but she kept her voice steady. "Impressive. Perhaps we could learn from each other." "Learn?" Zexthal's laughter boomed across the room. "What could you possibly teach us? Your weapons could not penetrate even our lightest armor." Your ships would break apart before our shields. He leaned down, bringing his glowing eyes level with Admiral Crawford's face. Here is what you will learn. Humans, you have two choices. Become servants of the Krillian Empire, and we will allow your species to live. Or resist us, and we will take your world by force. You have one of your years to decide. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but Admiral Crawford grabbed his arm before he could speak. We'll need time to discuss this with our leaders, she said. Of course, Zexel replied. Take all the time you need. But remember, we have destroyed species with weapons far more advanced than yours. Your kinetic toys and energy beams are no threat to us. As they walked back to their ship, Jake could hear the aliens still laughing behind them. Dr. Amanda Wells stared at the data on her computer screen for the 100th time that day. 6 months had passed since the meeting at Havenport, and Earth was in chaos. Every government on the planet was arguing about what to do next. Some wanted to surrender to the Krillians immediately. Others wanted to fight, even though they knew they would lose. The Global Defense Initiative had been formed 3 months ago, bringing together the best minds from every nation. Amanda worked in a secret underground laboratory beneath the mountains of Colorado. Most people didn't even know this place existed. Still working on the Kinetic Project? Asked Tony Baker as he walked into her lab. The engineer was carrying 2 cups of coffee and looked as tired as she felt. Someone has to, Amanda replied, taking the coffee gratefully. Everyone else is trying to copy alien energy weapons. But we don't understand the technology at all. It would take us decades to figure it out. Tony sat down at the workbench next to her. And you think throwing rocks at them will work better? Amanda laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not rocks. Projectiles moving at incredible speeds. The Krillians laughed at our weapons because they were too slow. But what if we could make them much, much faster? She pulled up a new file on her computer. The screen showed plans for a massive weapon that looked like a giant tube surrounded by coils of wire. A railgun, Tony said, studying the design. We've tried building these before. They never work well enough for real combat. Because we never had enough power, Amanda explained. But now we do. Fusion reactors can give us all the energy we need. If we can accelerate a projectile to 15% of light speed, the kinetic energy would be enormous. Tony whistled softly. That would hit with the force of a nuclear bomb. Exactly. And unlike energy weapons, you can't shield against pure kinetic force. Physics doesn't work that way. The door to the lab opened and Karen Hughes walked in. The materials scientist looked excited about something. I've got news, Karen said, holding up a small metal rod. The new superconductor worked. 0 resistance at room temperature. We can build magnetic coils that won't lose any power. Amanda jumped up from her chair. That's incredible. How much current can it handle? More than we'll ever need, Karen replied with a grin. I ran the numbers. With this material, we can build a railgun that actually works. Tony was looking at the plans again, but his expression was doubtful. Even if we can build it, where would we put it? This thing is massive. It's over a mile long. In space, Amanda said, we build it in orbit around the moon, hidden on the far side where the Krillians can't see it. Before Tony could respond, the lab door burst open. General Patrick Kane strode in, his face red with anger. The general was in charge of the Defense Initiative's weapons program, and he had never liked Amanda's project. Dr. Wells, I need to speak with you, he said in a voice that could freeze water. Amanda stood up straighter. What can I do for you, General? You can stop wasting time and resources on this railgun nonsense, Kane replied. I've just come from a meeting with the President. We're putting all our efforts into reverse engineering Krillian energy weapons. General, we've been trying that for 6 months with no progress, Amanda said, trying to keep her voice calm. My team has actually solved the railgun power problem. We can build a working weapon. Kane laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. A kinetic weapon? Against aliens who have energy shields? Dr. Wells, I watched those demonstrations. Their shields stopped our best plasma cannons. What makes you think a fancy bullet will do better? Because kinetic energy works differently than directed energy, Amanda replied. Their shields are designed to deflect or absorb energy beams. but a solid projectile moving at relativistic speeds transfers momentum directly. The shield can't redirect that kind of impact. Theory, Kane said dismissively. We need practical weapons, not science experiments. Karen stepped forward, still holding the superconductor. General, this isn't theory anymore. We've solved the materials problem. We can build this weapon. Kane looked at the three scientists for a long moment. You have 1 month, he said finally. 1 month to show me something that works. If you can't, I'm shutting down this project and moving all of you to the energy weapons team. After the general left, the lab was quiet for several minutes. 1 month, Tony said finally. That's not much time to build a mile-long railgun. Then we build a smaller one first, Amanda replied. A prototype, something to prove the concept works. She turned back to her computer and started typing. We'll need to contact the lunar mining stations. They have the equipment to build large structures in vacuum. What about power? Karen asked. Even a small railgun will need enormous amounts of energy. We'll have to use multiple fusion reactors, Amanda said. Wire them together for maximum output. Tony was already sketching new designs on his tablet. If we make it modular, we can assemble it in sections. The lunar factories can handle that. Outside the mountain laboratory, Krillian scout ships continued their lazy patrol of the outer solar system. Commander Billy Torres of the UHS Sentinel had been tracking them for weeks. The aliens weren't hiding their presence. They wanted humans to see them, to remember that the deadline was coming. 9 months left until the Krillian ultimatum expired. Amanda worked through the night, redesigning the railgun to fit their new timeline. She knew most people thought her project was hopeless. Even some of her own team had doubts. But she also knew something the others didn't understand. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. Humans had been throwing rocks at their enemies since the dawn of time. Now they just needed to throw them fast enough to matter. The lunar surface shook as a prototype railgun fired for the first time. Dr. Amanda Wells watched from the underground control bunker, her heart pounding as data flowed across the screens. 3 months of non-stop work had led to this moment. Target hit, announced Tony Baker, his voice filled with excitement. Tungsten projectile reached 15.2% of light speed. Impact energy equivalent to 50 tons of TNT. Amanda felt tears in her eyes. The test dummy they had placed 10 miles away had simply vanished, along with a large crater in the lunar rock around it. After months of calculations and sleepless nights, the railgun actually worked. How long until we can fire again? She asked. Karen Hughes checked her instruments and frowned. 6 hours minimum. The magnetic coils are still too hot. We need better cooling systems. Amanda nodded. 6 hours between shots wasn't ideal, but it was a start. The important thing was that they had proven kinetic weapons could work at these speeds. Back on Earth, Colonel Steve Parker read the test results with growing frustration. He had been put in charge of tactical planning for the coming war with the Krillians, and nothing he saw gave him hope. This is useless, he said to his aide, Lieutenant Gary Mills. 1 shot every 6 hours. The Krillians will destroy us long before we can reload. But, sir, look at the power of that single shot, Gary replied. 50 tons of TNT from a tungsten rod. That's incredible. Steve shook his head. Power doesn't matter if you can't hit anything. And even if you do hit, the energy shield will just deflect the projectile. We watched their demonstrations. Gary, their shield stopped everything we threw at them. He pulled up a tactical display showing Earth's defenses. 4 to 7 human warships, hundreds of orbital defense platforms, and thousands of fighter craft. Against 12 Krillian ships, it looked impressive. But Steve knew better. Their shields didn't even flicker when we hit them with plasma cannons, he continued. What makes Dr. Wells think a kinetic projectile will be different? Meanwhile, on the lunar testing facility, Amanda was working with a new team member. Rachel Stone was a tactical analyst who had been sent to evaluate the railgun's military potential. The computer models are interesting, Rachel said, studying the data on her tablet. But they are just guesses. We don't actually know how Krillian shield work. Amanda looked up from the cooling system she was repairing. We know they're designed to handle energy weapons. All alien military technology we've seen focuses on directed energy. But kinetic weapons work on completely different principles. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, Rachel said with a tired smile. Amanda picked up a coffee cup and held it in front of a desk lamp. Energy shields work like this cup blocking the light. The light hits the cup and gets absorbed or reflected. But watch this. She threw a pen at the cup. The pen knocked the cup over and kept going. Kinetic energy transfers momentum directly. You can't absorb momentum the same way you absorb light or heat. The shield has to physically stop the projectile, and that takes enormous amounts of structural strength. Rachel nodded slowly. And you think their shields aren't built for that kind of impact? I think no one in the galaxy has tried kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds before, Amanda replied. Why would they? Energy weapons are easier to build and maintain. But sometimes the old ways work better. 2 weeks later, their conversation was interrupted by an emergency broadcast from Earth. War Commander Zexthal appeared on every screen across the planet, his red eyes glowing with irritation. Humans of Earth, his deep voice rumbled, you have had 9 months to consider our generous offer. Your time grows short. The image changed to show Krillian ships moving through space. 12 massive vessels, each one larger than Earth's biggest battleship. In 3 months, we will arrive at your world. If you have not surrendered by then, we will demonstrate the price of defiance. 3 of your major population centers will be destroyed. After that, you will have one final chance to submit. The transmission ended, leaving Earth in silence. Amanda stared at the blank screen, feeling cold fear in her stomach. 3 months. The prototype railgun worked, but they were nowhere near ready to build a full-size weapon that could actually defend Earth. We need to speed up the timeline, she said to Tony and Karen. How? Tony asked. We're already working around the clock. The cooling problem alone will take weeks to solve. Then we solve it faster, Amanda replied. Contact every materials lab on Earth. Get me superconducting coolants, better heat sinks, anything that can reduce the charging time. Karen was already typing on her computer. What about power? Even if we solve cooling, we still need enormous amounts of energy. We'll build more fusion reactors, Amanda said. Small ones, modular designs that can be connected together. Rachel looked at the test data again, her expression worried. Even if everything works perfectly, we'll only have one shot. If the shields stop our projectile, we're finished. Amanda nodded grimly. She had run the calculations 1,000 times. The railgun would work. The physics was solid. But physics on paper wasn't the same as physics in a real battle against an enemy they didn't fully understand. Outside the lunar facility, Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble. Somewhere out there, Krillian ships were coming, and humanity's only hope was a weapon that most of their own military leaders thought was useless. Amanda went back to work on the cooling system. 3 months wasn't much time, but it was all they had. The fate of the human race might depend on making kinetic weapons work fast enough to matter. The Krillian fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly when War Commander Zexthal had promised. 12 massive ships, each one dark as space itself, moved toward Earth with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, watching the enemy ships on his tactical display. 3 months had passed since the ultimatum, and Earth had not surrendered. Every human knew what that meant. All ships report ready for battle, said Lieutenant Ben Cooper, his voice trying to sound brave. 4 to 7 vessels standing by for your orders. Jake nodded but felt sick to his stomach. 4 to 7 ships against 12 sounded like good odds, until you remembered that human weapons had barely scratched Krillian armor during the demonstrations. Signal from the flagship. Reported Navigator Amy Walsh. War Commander Zexthal wants to speak. The main screen flickered, and the alien commander appeared. His red eyes seemed to glowing with satisfaction as he looked at the humans. Captain Morrison, Zexthal said, his voice like grinding stone. Your species has chosen poorly. We offered you the chance to live as servants. Instead, you choose to die as fools. We choose to live as free people, Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Zexthal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Free? You will be free to watch your cities burn. We will begin with your population centers called New York, London, and Tokyo. 3 examples to show your species a price of defiance. The alien ships moved closer to Earth, their energy shields glowing like deadly auroras. Jake could see weapon ports opening along their hulls, revealing the terrible power within. All ships. Jake said over the fleet communications. This is it. Attack Formation Alpha. Protect Earth at all costs. The human fleet moved forward, their engines burning bright against the darkness. Captain Sandra White in the UHS Guardian took the left flank, while Captain Dan Foster in the UHS Vigilant covered the right. Smaller ships filled the gaps between them, creating a wall of metal and determination. Enemy ships opening fire, called out Science Officer Carl Davis. The Krillian weapons lit up space like deadly fireworks. Beams of pure white energy reached across the void, moving faster than human eyes could follow. The first beam struck the UHS Vela, and the entire ship simply vanished in a flash of light. Return fire! Jake shouted. Human weapons responded with everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, nuclear missiles, and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the fleets. The barrage was impressive, lighting up the darkness with colors that had no names. But when the light faded, the Krillian ships were untouched. Their energy shields had absorbed or deflected every shot without even flickering. No effect, reported Carl, his voice hollow with despair. Their shields are holding perfectly. Another Krillian beam lanced out, destroying the UHS Ranger in a single shot. Then another and another. Human ships died one by one, their crews vaporized before they could scream. We're not even slowing them down, said Ben, watching the tactical display with horror. In the first hour battle, 18 human ships were destroyed. The Krillian fleet had not taken a single point of damage. It was exactly what everyone had feared. On the lunar facility, Dr. Amanda Wells watched the battle through telescopes and felt her heart breaking. The human fleet was being slaughtered, and there was nothing she could do to help. The railgun platform she had built was still 4 hours away from being fully charged. Can we reduce the charging time? She asked Tony Baker desperately. Tony was already working on the power systems, sweat dripping down his face. I'm trying to redirect power from life support and communications. It might get us down to 4 hours, but that's the absolute minimum. Karen Hughes was monitoring the weapon status on her computer. The magnetic coils are holding steady. If we can get enough power, the gun should fire. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Crawford watched the battle from the Global Defense Command Center. The reports coming in were devastating. Nearly half the human fleet was gone, and the Krillians were barely trying. So, said her aide, Colonel Janet Ross, the Krillian flagship is moving into position over New York. They are preparing to fire on the city. Crawford felt rage and helplessness mix in her chest. 8 million people lived in New York. In a few minutes, they would all be dead, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. War Commander Zextal appeared on the communication screen again, his red eyes bright with victory. Observe? Humans, he said. This is what happens to species that defy the Krillian Empire. The massive alien flagship moved into low orbit above Earth. Its main weapon, a cannon larger than a city block, began to glow with deadly energy. On the streets below, people looked up at the sky and saw their doom approaching. Charging sequence at 90%, Tony reported from the moon. We need more time. We don't have more time, Amanda replied, watching the Krillian flagship position itself over New York. How long until minimum firing power? 2 minutes, Karen said, her fingers flying over the controls. But we'll only get one shot. If this doesn't work. It has to work, Amanda said firmly. It's the only chance we have. The Krillian flagship's main weapon reached full power. A beam of pure destruction prepared to launch down at the city below, where millions of people waited to die. Firing in 10 seconds, Zextal announced. Let this be a lesson to any who would resist us. On the moon, Amanda watched the power readings climb toward the minimum needed for a shot. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and everything depended on a weapon that most people still thought was just a fancy slingshot. 5 seconds of minimum power, Tony called out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire! Amanda shouted. The railgun platform Thor's hammer unleashed its fury into the void. The tungsten projectile from Thor's hammer traveled through space at 17% of light speed. It covered the distance from the moon to Earth in less than 8 seconds, moving faster than anything the Krillians had ever encountered in battle. War Commander Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final preparations for the bombardment of New York. His weapon system showed full power, ready to demonstrate Krillian might to the stubborn humans below. "Fire!" he commanded. At that exact moment, the railgun projectile struck his ship. The Krillian energy shields, designed to deflect particle beams and energy weapons, encountered something completely different. The tungsten rod, no larger than a telephone pole but moving at relativistic speed, carried kinetic energy beyond imagination. Physics took over. The shields tried to stop the projectile, but kinetic energy cannot be deflected like light or heat. The massive momentum had to go somewhere. The shield generators overloaded instantly, their power cores exploding and cascading failures throughout the ship. The projectile punched through the flagship's hull like it was made of paper. The kinetic energy transfer was so violent that the entire front section of the ship simply vaporized. Metal, air, and alien bodies became superheated plasma in microseconds. Zexthal had time for exactly one thought before he died. This was impossible. The explosion lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. The Krillian flagship, pride of their battle fleet, broke apart in a spectacular fireball that could be seen from every continent. On the bridge of the UHS Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison stared at his tactical display in shock. The largest enemy ship, the one that had been about to destroy New York, was gone. Simply gone. "What just happened?" asked Lieutenant Ben Cooper, his voice filled with amazement. "I think," said Science Officer Carl Davis slowly, "someone just saved the world." The remaining 11 Krillian ships stopped moving. For the first time in their military history, they had watched one of their most powerful vessels destroyed by an enemy they had considered primitive. On the lunar facility, Dr. Amanda Wells was crying and laughing at the same time. The railgun had worked. The months of calculations, the sleepless nights, the doubts and fears, all of it had been worth this moment. "Direct hit on the flagship," Tony Baker reported, his voice shaking with excitement. "The target is completely destroyed." Kinetic transfer was even higher than predicted, added Karen Hughes. The projectile carried so much energy that it overloaded their entire shield system. Amanda wiped tears from her eyes and looked at the power readings. "How long until we can fire again?" 3 hours minimum, Tony replied. "But Amanda, we did it. We actually did it." The surviving Krillian ships were in chaos. Subcommander Veltar, now the highest-ranking officer alive, tried to understand what had killed his war commander. Their sensors had detected the projectile too late to react, moving faster than their targeting systems could track. "Report," he demanded of his science officer. "The projectile was solid matter moving at 17% of light speed," came the reply. The kinetic energy was equivalent to a large nuclear device. "Impossible," Veltar said. "No species uses kinetic weapons at those velocities. The power requirements would be enormous." "Nevertheless, Commander, that is what happened. Our shields were designed to handle energy weapons, not relativistic projectiles." On Earth, the human fleet rallied around their impossible victory. Captain Sandra White opened communications with all remaining ships. "This is Guardian. I don't know how, but someone just killed their flagship. All ships, attack formation. Let's finish this while they're confused." The human ships moved forward with new hope. Their conventional weapons still couldn't penetrate Krillian shields, but the aliens no longer seemed invincible. Captain Dan Foster brought the UHS Vigilant close to an enemy cruiser and opened fire with everything he had. The plasma cannons and particle beams struck the alien shield without effect, but something had changed. The Krillians were no longer advancing. They seemed afraid. Lieutenant Commander Pete Johnson, communications officer on the Defiance, intercepted alien transmissions. The Krillian language was harsh and guttural, but their computers had learned to translate it during the months of monitoring. "They are panicking," he reported to Captain Morrison. "They keep saying something about impossible weapons and primitive kinetics." "They can't understand how we did it," Morrison realized. In their minds, kinetic weapons are obsolete technology. On the moon, Amanda was already working on the next shot. The remaining Krillian ships were spreading out, no longer confident in their shields. But they were still dangerous, and Earth needed protection. Target the largest remaining ship, she told Tony. If we can destroy another one, maybe the rest will retreat. 3 hours is a long time, Karen warned. They might attack Earth directly before we can fire again. Amanda nodded grimly. Then we'd better hope our fleet can keep them busy. The battle continued around Earth, but everything had changed. The human ships still couldn't damage the Krillians, but they no longer needed to. The aliens were retreating, trying to understand how their most advanced ship had been destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Subcommander Veltar made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier. He ordered his ships to withdraw to a safe distance while they figured out what had happened. For the first time since the battle began, Earth was no longer in immediate danger. In New York City, 8 million people looked up at the sky where the alien flagship had been preparing to kill them all. Instead of death rays, they saw only debris burning up in the atmosphere like the most beautiful fireworks ever created. Amanda watched the enemy's ships pull back and felt a moment of satisfaction. The railgun had worked exactly as designed, but the war was far from over. 11 Krillian ships still surrounded Earth, and they would eventually figure out how to counter kinetic weapons. "How many more shots do we have?" she asked. Tony checked their ammunition supply. 17 tungsten rods ready to fire. After that, we'll need to wait for resupply from Earth. "Then we'd better make each shot count," Amanda replied. "This war is just beginning." The destruction of their flagship shattered something fundamental in the Krillian mindset. For over 1,000 years, they had been the hunters, never the prey. Now, floating in the cold void around Earth, they face an enemy that could kill them with weapons they didn't understand. Subcommander Veltar paced the bridge of his cruiser, trying to make sense of what had happened. His red eyes burned with frustration as he studied the tactical reports. The projectile came from their moon, reported his science officer, a thin Krillian named Kexmol. "We detected the launch signature 8 seconds before impact." 8 seconds, Veltar repeated. Not enough time to target or evade. "Commander, how is this possible?" asked another officer. "Kinetic weapons are primitive technology. No civilized species has used them for centuries." Veltar had no answer. Everything he knew about warfare said the humans should be helpless. Their energy weapons were weak, their ships were fragile, and their technology was thousands of years behind Krillian standards. Yet somehow, they had built a weapon that could punch through the most advanced shields in the galaxy. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was trying to understand his own impossible victory. The human fleet had regrouped around Earth, and for the first time in hours, they weren't being destroyed one by one. "The aliens have stopped advancing," reported Navigator Amy Walsh. "They are holding position at 20,000 kilometers." "They are scared," said Lieutenant Ben Cooper with amazement in his voice. "We actually scared them." Jake nodded, but he knew the situation was still desperate. One dead alien ship didn't win a war. The remaining 11 vessels could still destroy Earth if they decided to attack together. "Signal from Lunar Facility," announced Science Officer Carl Davis. "Dr. Wells wants to speak with you." Amanda's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted but determined. "Captain Morrison, we're working on a second shot, but we need 3 hours to recharge. Can your fleet keep the aliens busy that long?" Jake looked at his tactical display. The human fleet had 29 ships left, all damaged from the earlier fighting. Against 11 undamaged Krillian vessels, they wouldn't last 10 minutes in a real battle. "We'll do our best," he replied. "But if they decide to attack in force, we can't stop them." "Then we'd better pray they stay confused," Amanda said. On the Lunar Facility, Amanda and her team worked frantically to prepare the second shot. Tony Baker was pushing the cooling systems beyond their design limits, trying to reduce the charging time. "If we rear out power from the habitat modules, we might get down to 2.5 hours, he said, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Do it," Amanda replied. "We can survive without life support for a few hours. Earth can't survive another alien attack." Karen Hughes was monitoring the magnetic coils for signs of overheating. "The superconductors are holding, but barely. One more shot at maximum power, and we'll need to replace half the system." "One shot might be enough," Amanda said. "If we can destroy their second largest ship, the others might retreat entirely." Back in space, Captain Sandra White was leading the human fleet in a dangerous game. Her ships moved in patterns around the alien vessels, never getting close enough to attack, but staying close enough to threaten. It was like a pack of wolves circling a group of bays, too weak to fight but too stubborn to run. "This is insane," said a tactical officer. "We're practically dancing with ships that could vaporize us." "That's the point," Sandra replied. "As long as we keep moving, they have to watch us. And as long as they are watching us, they are not attacking Earth." The psychological effect on the Krillian fleet was exactly what she hoped. They had expected to face a weak enemy that would collapse after the first demonstration of superior firepower. Instead, they found humans who kept fighting even after losing half their fleet. Lieutenant Commander Pete Johnson continued intercepting alien communications from his position on the Defiance. The translations were becoming more desperate. "They are arguing among themselves," he reported. "Some want to retreat and call for reinforcements. Others want to attack Earth before we can fire again." "What's stopping them?" Jake asked. "Fear," Pete replied. "They don't know if we have more weapons like the one that killed their flagship. They're afraid of walking into another trap." On his cruiser, Veltar was having the same argument with his officers. Half wanted to flee immediately. Half wanted to destroy the human fleet before it could cause more damage. "We should withdraw," insisted Commander Nekval. "These humans have weapons we don't understand. We need to study them before attacking again." "Withdrawal is defeat," Veltar replied angrily. "The Empire does not retreat from primitives." "The Empire does not lose flagships to primitives either," Nekval shot back. "Yet here we are." The argument was interrupted by their sensor officer. "Commander, the human ships are moving into attack formation." Veltar looked at the tactical display and saw the human fleet approaching. 29 small ships against 11 Krillian cruisers should have been a joke. But after watching their flagship die, nothing seemed certain anymore. "They are bluffing," he said. "Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields." "But what if they have more of those kinetic weapons?" asked Nekval. "What if their ships carry the same technology that destroyed Zexthal?" The question hung in the air like poison. The Krillians had no way of knowing that Thor's hammer was a fixed installation on the moon. For all they knew, every human ship might carry similar weapons. Captain Morrison led the human fleet forward, hoping his bluff would work. The aliens had superior technology, but they had lost their confidence. Sometimes that was enough to tip the balance. "All ships, maintain formation," he broadcast. "Make them think we're more dangerous than we are." The two fleets moved toward each other in the darkness of space, but this time it was the aliens who hesitated first. 2 hours and 37 minutes after the first shot, Thor's hammer fired again. The second tungsten projectile streaked across space at 17% of light speed, aimed at the largest remaining Krillian ship. Subcommander Veltar had exactly enough time to see the projectile on his sensors before it struck. His cruiser, the Pride of Krylon, exploded in a ball of superheated plasma that lit up the solar system. The remaining 10 Krillian ships didn't wait to see if there would be a third shot. They turned and fled toward the edge of the solar system, their engines burning at maximum power. Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien retreat from the bridge of the UHS Defiance, hardly believing what he was seeing. The mighty Krillian Empire, terror of the galaxy, was running away from Earth. "Should we pursue?" asked Lieutenant Ben Cooper. "With what?" Jake replied. "Half our fleet is destroyed, and the other half is barely holding together. Let them go. We've done enough for one day." The news of humanity's victory spread across Earth within hours. In New York, the city that had been minutes away from destruction, people poured into the streets to celebrate. Similar scenes played out in London, Tokyo, and every other major city on the planet. But the celebration was short-lived. Everyone knew the Krillians would be back, and next time they would bring more ships. 6 months later, the landscape of the galaxy had changed completely. The news of the Krillian defeat had spread to every corner of space, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees from the Empire's rule. Dr. Amanda Wells stood in her new laboratory on Earth, watching construction crews work on the 12th Railgun platform. The Global Defense Initiative had become the Terran Federation, and Amanda had been promoted to Director of Kinetic Weapons Research. "How many more do we need?" asked Tony Baker, now her chief engineer. "As many as we can build," Amanda replied. "The Krillians aren't our only enemies out there." She was right. The defeat of the Krillian fleet had shattered their reputation throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived under alien rule for centuries began to rebel. The Zephyrian Collective declared independence. The mining worlds of the Outer Rim refused to pay tribute. Even the Krillian home worlds faced internal uprising. Admiral Lisa Crawford, now Supreme Commander of the Terran Federation, read the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The ripple effect of their victory was still spreading. The Andorian Republic wants to form an alliance, reported her aide, Colonel Janet Russ. They are offering to share their starship technology in exchange for railgun designs. What about the Krillians themselves? Crawford asked. Split into 3 factions. One wants to negotiate with us. One wants revenge. The third is fighting a civil war on their home planets. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Commodore Jake Morrison prepared for humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission. His ship was the newest in the fleet, equipped with both conventional weapons and a ship-mounted railgun based on Amanda's designs. Course laid in for the Centauri system. Reported his navigator, Lieutenant Amy Walsh, now promoted to full lieutenant. The Hegemony Council is waiting to meet with us. Jake nodded. The Hegemony was a loose alliance of species that had united to resist Krillian expansion. Now they wanted to meet the humans who had accomplished what they thought was impossible. "Take us out," Jake ordered. The Retribution jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying humanity's message to the stars. They were no longer the weak species that had been laughed at by aliens. They were a force to be respected. Back in Krillian space, War Commander Vexdan stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at reports from the frontier. Vexdan had been promoted after Zexthol's death, and he faced a problem no Krillian commander had ever encountered. 17 colonies have declared independence, reported his intelligence officer. The humans are selling railgun technology to anyone who opposes us. And our response? Vexdan asked. Limited. Our fleet is spread too thin fighting rebellions on a dozen worlds. We no longer have the strength to enforce our will everywhere. Vexdan thought about his predecessor's final moments. Zexthol had died because he underestimated a species that used primitive weapons. The irony was bitter. The Krillians had become so focused on energy weapons that they had forgotten the fundamental laws of physics. Kinetic energy could not be deflected or absorbed. It had to be stopped by physical force, and that required structures the Krillians had never bothered to build. "What are our options?" he asked. "Negotiation," came the reply. "The humans have offered to discuss terms." The idea of negotiating with a species they had planned to enslave was humiliating. But Vexdan was a practical commander. Pride had already cost the Empire too much. "Contact a diplomatic vessel," he ordered. "Arrange a meeting." On Earth, Amanda Wells received news of the Krillian peace overture while testing her latest creation. Project Thunderstrike 2 was a compact railgun that could be mounted on cruiser-class ships, giving the entire human fleet the same devastating advantage that had saved Earth. "They want to talk," Tony reported, reading the message from Admiral Crawford. "Good," Amanda replied. "Maybe we can end this war without destroying half the galaxy." She looked out the window at the night sky, where human ships now patrolled alongside vessels from a dozen other species. The galaxy was a different place than it had been a year ago. Humanity had entered the cosmic community as beggars, dismissed as primitives with worthless weapons. Now they were among the most feared and respected species in known space, all because they had remembered something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes the oldest solutions, when perfected, could overcome the most advanced technology. Physics didn't care about reputation or advanced civilization. Energy was energy, and momentum was momentum. The Krillians had learned that lesson the hard way. Now the galaxy would have to learn to live with the consequences.